Let us start with Peter Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring a bill to amend the Working Time Regulations 1998 to reduce the maximum working week from 48 hours per week to 32 hours per week and to provide for overtime pay and connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, it was almost a century ago that British workers switched from a 6-day week to a 5-day week. It used to be the case that Saturday was included in a standard working week, but between the 1920s and the 1940s, the 5-day working week, along with the weekend, became the normal way of working across most of the Western world. One of the early pioneers was Ford Motor Company in the United States. On May the 1st, 1926, Ford became the first major company in America to adopt a 5-day, 40-hour week for workers in its automotive factories. Edsel Ford, Henry Ford's son and the company's president, said, "Every man needs more than 1 day a week for rest and recreation. We believe that in order to live properly, every man should have more time to spend with his family." Though workers' time was reduced, productivity went up. Manufacturers all over the country soon followed Ford's lead. Closer to home, John Bootle, the chairman of Boots Cosmetic Company, initiated the same experiment. Again, he found that 2 days off each week had a positive effect on productivity and reduced absenteeism. The weekend was made official Boots policy in 1934. Those arguing against such a move at the time said that the country would suffer economically. Businesses won't be able to afford it, and workers won't be able to adapt. Mr. Speaker, they were proved wrong. It should be put on record that without sustained campaigns by the trade union movement that began towards the end of the 19th century and lasted many decades, the weekend, which we all enjoy today, would never have been won. It is with this historical context that honourable and right honourable members should reflect on the surge in the popularity we are seeing today for a 4-day working week. The 9-to-5, 5-day working week still remains the dominant model of work across much of the Western world. But it's important to remember that it was designed for the industrial and agricultural economy we had at the time. Members would agree, I'm sure, that 100 years later, the world of work has completely transformed. However, working hours have not adapted to the changing nature of work. Campaigners for a 4-day week say the 9-to-5, 5-day working week is outdated and no longer fit for purpose. A look back at our more recent history suggests they have a point. Since the 1980s, working hours in the UK have barely reduced at all, despite the productivity gains of the last few decades. None of this has been passed on to workers through more free leisure time. Mr. Speaker, we are long overdue an update, and the COVID pandemic has given us that opportunity. The UK is currently taking part in the biggest ever experiment of a 4-day week with no loss of pay for workers. 70 companies and over 3,300 workers are taking part in a pilot run by 4-Day Week Global, the think tank Autonomy, and the 4-Day Week campaign. A survey of the companies taking part at the halfway point suggests that the trial is going extremely well. The pilot has companies taking part from a diverse range of sectors. There's hospitality, manufacturing, healthcare, housing, telecommunications, construction, financial services. And it may seem counterintuitive that working less hours results in greater productivity, but there is already surmounting evidence that proves the hypothesis. Wherever the 4-day week with no loss of pay has been trialled across the world, it's been a win-win for both workers and employers. Productivity has improved, and so has the well-being of workers. When Microsoft in Japan trialled a 4-day week, they found product increased by 40%. In Iceland, the country, not the company, the largest ever public sector shorter working week trial was, quote, an overwhelming success and resulted in 86% of Iceland's working population gaining the right to shorten their hours. From 2015 to 19, Iceland ran 2 large-scale trials of a reduced working week of 35 to 36 hours with no reduction in pay. The analysis of the results, which included 2,500 workers, demonstrate the transformative effects of a shorter working week for both employees and businesses. Productivity and service provision remain the same or improved across the majority of trial workplaces. Worker well-being dramatically increased across a range of indicators, from perceived stress and burnout to health and work-life balance. The trials also remained revenue neutral for both the City Council and the Government. So I was pleased to see last month that South Cambridgeshire District Council became the first ever UK council to move forward with plans for a 4-day week. So a 3-month trial of a 4-day week with no loss of pay will begin in January for all desk-based staff at the council, and if successful, a trial of the council's blue-collar workers, such as bin collection crews, will follow later next year. And of course, there are other major benefits for businesses that are worth noting: a reduction in 6 days and the ability to retain sick days, and the ability to retain staff and attract new talent, which is increasingly important in a tight labour market. So, for example, when Atom Bank, the largest UK 4-day week employer, made the switch, they found job applications increased by an astonishing 500% in just 3 months. The 4-day trial, the 4-day 32-hour week, is a multi-dividend policy which ultimately is about giving everyone the time to live happier and more fulfilled lives. Long working hours are an acute problem in this country. According to the TUC, British workers put in some of the longest full-time hours in Europe, while having one of the least productive economies in comparison and the fewest number of bank holidays. According to the Health and Safety Executive, 18 million workdays were lost in 2019-20 as a result of work-related stress, depression or anxiety. Furthermore, the World Health Organization has shown that long working hours are killing hundreds of thousands of people globally every year. Mr. Speaker, it's time for change. The arguments made against the 4-day working week today are exactly the same arguments that were made against the 5-day week 100 years ago. I'm afraid the evidence just doesn't back it up. All the evidence shows a 4-day week with no loss of pay would be good for the economy, good for workers and good for the environment. We shouldn't forget the impact such a move could also have on bringing down carbon emissions. One study has suggested that by simply working 1 day less, carbon emissions could fall by up to 127 million tonnes per year, and that's the equivalent of taking all private cars off the road. The pandemic has undoubtedly shaken up the world of work, and already we've seen a huge rise in remote working, flexible working, part-time, and yes, a 4-day working week. Change is coming, and this government and my own party should grasp it. Mr. Speaker, we could be leading the world in moving to a 4-day week, and my bill today will enable us to do just that. The same old arguments about the economy suffering were made against the introduction of the weekend, holiday pay, maternity pay, the living wage, equal pay, and they're being made against the 4-day week today. These arguments were wrong then, and they are wrong now. And the growing number of businesses adopting a 4-day week successfully in this country are proving them wrong. Long working hours and low wages is no way to live. This bill includes a clause that will ensure that anyone working beyond a 32-hour working week is paid extra in overtime. This is in recognition of falling wages and falling living standards that this country has experienced over the last decade or so. Mr. Speaker, the movement for a shorter working week is growing in strength and momentum. Honourable members, I'm proud to support this movement, and I urge colleagues to support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.